Karen Grassle will forever be remembered as Caroline Ingalls, the steady, loving mother on Little House on the Prairie. To millions of viewers, she wasn't just an actress. She was the very image of warmth, of guidance, of a family anchor. Her face carried the comfort of home, the security of simpler times, and the resilience of a mother who never faltered. But the truth of Karen's life was far more complicated than the smiling figure on screen. Behind the camera, she carried frustrations she never spoke about, battles she fought alone, and a career that never again reached the heights of that one defining role. For decades, fans wondered why she disappeared, why she rarely appeared in Hollywood again, and why her story seemed to fade into silence. Now at 82, Karen's journey has come full circle. She has revealed a truth that even those who loved her most never expected. And what has happened to her in these later years, the struggles, the regrets, and the quiet resilience that still defines her, will leave you in tears. Karen Grassle's journey to becoming one of television's most iconic mothers began far from the wide-open Prairie's audiences came to know. She was born in 1942 in Berkeley, California, the daughter of a working-class family with little connection to the world of show business. From the beginning, Karen carried both sensitivity and determination, qualities that would shape her as an actress. She pursued academics first, studying English and drama at the University of California, Berkeley, before moving east to refine her craft at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. It was there, in cold rehearsal halls and cramped student apartments, that she first discovered her strength, not in glamour, but in discipline. By the early 1970s, Karen was working steadily in theater, performing on stages that offered little recognition but immense experience. She imagined a future rooted in Shakespeare, in Chekhov, in the kind of serious drama she had studied so intensely. Television seemed distant, almost beneath her training. Yet Hollywood, with all its unpredictability, had different plans. In 1973, an audition changed everything. Karen's agent called her in for a new family series based on Laura Ingalls Wilder's beloved books. At first she hesitated. Television was not the career path she had envisioned. But that single decision to walk into the audition room would alter not only her life, but the childhoods of millions of viewers. The role of Caroline Ingalls had already proven difficult to cast. Producers searched for someone who could embody strength without harshness, compassion without sentimentality. Many actresses had tried, but none had delivered the balance the character demanded. When Karen entered the room, something shifted. She wasn't glamorous in a Hollywood sense. She didn't radiate star power. What she offered was something deeper: quiet steadiness, dignity, and an unshakable warmth. Michael Landon, already a star from Bonanza and the driving creative force behind the series, immediately saw what others had missed. He knew Caroline needed to be believable, as both pioneer and nurturer, and in Karen he found the perfect match. When Little House on the Prairie premiered in 1974, the country was captivated. Families gathered weekly to watch the Ingalls clan navigate the challenges of frontier life. Viewers saw Michael Landon's Charles Ingalls as the dependable father, but it was Karen's Caroline who grounded the family. She was the emotional backbone, the character who stitched together faith, morality, and unconditional love. Fans quickly embraced her not only as Ma Ingalls but as the kind of mother many wished they had. Letters poured in from across America, thanking her for portraying a figure of gentleness and moral clarity in a world that felt increasingly uncertain. For Karen, the sudden fame was overwhelming. She had gone from struggling actress to household name almost overnight. The transition came with admiration, but also with responsibility. She understood that audiences didn't simply see a character. They projected onto her their own ideas of family, of motherhood, of stability. Children would run up to her in public, calling her Ma, expecting the same warmth they saw on screen. Parents wrote letters about how Caroline's values had shaped their own families. Karen was humbled, but she also felt the pressure. She was no longer simply an actress performing a role. She had become a symbol. Yet symbols come with sacrifice. For every fan letter, there was also the weight of being locked into an image. Karen wanted to be recognized as a serious actress capable of range and complexity. But the success of Little House meant she would always be Caroline Ingalls first, and Karen Grassle second. At the height of her fame, she could not have imagined how this attachment to a single role would shape the rest of her career. The world had given her the gift of recognition, but it had also quietly set a boundary she would spend years trying to cross. And while audiences were celebrating Ma Ingalls, Karen herself was already beginning to sense the challenges ahead. Beneath the Prairie sunsets and wholesome family values, the seeds of future conflict were quietly being sown. She had achieved what so many dreamed of, a role that defined an era, but she was about to discover that success on screen came at a cost she never expected. Karen Grassle may have become America's mother, but behind the warm glow of Little House, she would soon find herself struggling with realities that shattered the illusion of family harmony. The success of Little House on the Prairie made it appear to viewers as though the cast had stepped into an idyllic family both on and off screen. Week after week, audiences saw Karen Grassle smile warmly, her voice calm and reassuring, her presence the steady heartbeat of the Ingalls home. What no one saw was the tension simmering just beyond the camera's frame. Life on set was not nearly as gentle as the show's portrayal of frontier life. Michael Landon, as producer, director, and star, held near total control over the series. His charisma drew people in, but his dominance left little room for negotiation. Karen admired his drive and recognized his talent, but she also found herself frustrated. Despite being the female lead and the cornerstone of the show's emotional weight, she was paid far less than her male counterparts. At first she accepted it quietly, convincing herself it was part of Hollywood's hierarchy. But as the seasons went on, the disparity became harder to ignore. She was not just acting in a role, she was carrying the moral fabric of the series. And yet when she asked for fair treatment, the response was silence. The environment often blurred the line between camaraderie and competition. While the children in the cast adored her, and Melissa Gilbert would later describe Karen as protective and maternal, Karen herself sometimes felt isolated. Landon's focus was always on maintaining the vision of the show, and disagreements with him often left her unheard. Behind the polished family image, she wrestled with the reality of working in an industry where women's contributions were undervalued. Her character was celebrated as the perfect wife and mother, but the actress behind her was battling to be seen as an equal. Filming was also grueling. Long days under the hot California sun, endless costume changes into restrictive prairie dresses, and emotional scenes filmed with little room for rest. Karen prided herself on professionalism, never letting discomfort seep into her performance, but the exhaustion was real. The frontier hardships written into scripts mirrored the strain she felt carrying her own role within the production. Viewers believed they were watching an effortless display of maternal strength, but every episode was built on sacrifice, both fictional and personal. Adding to the strain was the way her character was often sidelined in storylines. Karen had envisioned Caroline Ingalls as layered, strong, and deeply human. Yet too often, scripts left her as the quiet background to Charles Ingalls' heroics. She grew resentful that her character, who anchored the family, was rarely given the complexity she deserved. For a classically trained actress who had honed her skills on serious theater, the underuse of her talent cut deeply. She could feel her artistic ambitions shrinking inside a role that should have elevated her. Still, Karen kept smiling. She kept embodying the mother that fans adored. She showed up every day with dedication, even as her frustrations grew. The world outside saw nothing of the quiet battles happening just out of view, and in many ways, she trapped herself in silence. Speaking up meant risking her role. Remaining quiet meant carrying the weight alone. For years she chose silence, allowing the myth of harmony to stand unchallenged. But silence never lasts forever. The show gave Karen fame, stability, and a permanent place in television history. Yet it also left her questioning her worth, exhausted by compromise, and aware that the perfect family was a fantasy held together by unspoken strain. Karen had given the world a flawless image of motherhood, but when she finally walked away from the Prairie, she would learn just how unforgiving Hollywood could be to a woman known only for one role. When Karen Grassle stepped away from Little House on the Prairie in 1982, she believed it was the right decision. The show had given her recognition, but the weight of compromise had grown unbearable. She longed for creative freedom, for opportunities that would let her explore characters beyond the confines of prairie dresses and kitchen scenes. Yet the moment she left, the harsh reality of Hollywood revealed itself. Audiences still adored her as Caroline Ingalls, but producers and casting directors saw something else. A woman permanently stamped with the role of Ma Tu. To them, she wasn't a versatile actress capable of transformation. She was a symbol of wholesome family values and nothing more. That image, once her greatest strength, became a cage she could not escape. Roles offered to her were sparse, often minor appearances in television movies or guest spots that leaned on nostalgia rather than innovation. For a performer who had trained in Shakespeare and dreamed of serious dramatic work, it felt like a slow suffocation. The years immediately following Little House were marked by uncertainty. Karen returned to theater, seeking solace on the stage where her career had begun. Regional productions welcomed her talent, and she immersed herself in roles that challenged her again. But theater lacked the financial stability of television. Paychecks were inconsistent, and acclaim was limited to small audiences. The shift from being recognized everywhere to walking through cities unnoticed was jarring. Karen had gone from millions of viewers each week to stages where only a few hundred gathered. The contrast was crushing. Financial strain soon followed. Without the steady salary of a network series, she struggled to maintain the lifestyle she had built. Bills piled up, and savings dwindled. At times, she accepted jobs far below her abilities simply to keep afloat. Interviews, when they came, often circled back to Little House, leaving her trapped in endless questions about Michael Landon and life on set, rather than her current ambitions. Each reminder deepened her frustration. The world would not let her move on, no matter how desperately she wanted to. More than money, though, it was the silence that haunted her. Once, she had been at the center of living rooms across America. Now her phone rarely rang. The industry that had embraced her so quickly after her breakout role seemed to have abandoned her just as swiftly. She faced the painful truth that Hollywood rarely offered second chances, especially for women entering middle age. Youth and novelty were currency, and Karen, despite her talent, was considered expendable. Yet even in this period of decline, she showed resilience. She continued to teach, to mentor, and to perform wherever opportunities arose. She leaned into her craft, even when recognition never came. But inside, doubts festered. She questioned whether leaving the Prairie had been a mistake, whether she had sacrificed the security of one great role for dreams that the industry would never allow her to realize. Her personal life, too, reflected the instability of her career. Relationships faltered under the weight of financial uncertainty and emotional exhaustion. Friends noted her tendency to retreat inward, to guard herself against further disappointment. What once had been hope for reinvention now felt like survival, one step at a time. The woman who had embodied strength and steadiness on screen was, in reality, navigating a fragile existence. The promise of Hollywood had faded, replaced by the cold silence of doors closed before they even opened. But as Karen struggled to find her footing professionally, the real battle was just beginning, one that had nothing to do with scripts or casting calls, and everything to do with survival against her own inner demons. When the applause faded and the auditions slowed, Karen Grassle was left not only with financial instability, but with the weight of battles she could no longer mask. The world remembered her as the steadfast Ma Ingalls, yet privately she was wrestling with vulnerabilities that threatened to undo her. Alcohol became both a comfort and a curse. What began as a way to numb the sting of disappointment gradually deepened into dependence. Karen herself would later admit that drinking was how she coped with rejection and loneliness. For someone who had built her identity on strength and composure, the loss of control was devastating. Each relapse left her with greater shame, and each attempt to quit reminded her how difficult the climb back would be. Her personal relationships carried their own share of heartbreak. Romantic commitments faltered, friendships weakened, and her sense of belonging shrank. In interviews much later, she acknowledged that her drinking cost her trust and stability, but at the time, denial often masked the full damage. What audiences never realized was that the woman who had played America's moral compass was in truth drifting without one of her own. Financial troubles compounded her struggles. With fewer roles and smaller checks, she faced choices she never expected. There were periods when she sold belongings to cover expenses, moments when even basic security felt uncertain. For someone once adored on screens across the nation, the quiet indignity of scraping by was both humbling and painful. The glitter of Hollywood had vanished, leaving only bare survival. What made these years particularly isolating was the absence of recognition. Karen was still alive, still working, still fighting, but she felt invisible. The children who had once rushed to meet her at events had grown up. The producers who once praised her reliability had long since moved on. She was in many ways a ghost of her own success, walking through the world with a past that overshadowed her present. And yet, resilience stirred within her. Hitting bottom forced her to confront the habits and silences that had governed her life. She sought help, leaned on recovery programs, and began piecing herself back together. The path was not quick, nor was it linear. But for the first time since leaving Little House, she found strength in honesty rather than performance. She no longer had to pretend to be unshakable. Acknowledging her struggles became the first step in reclaiming her life. As she grew stronger, Karen began to write. Putting her story on paper gave her a voice that acting no longer provided. She could tell her truth in her own words, without scripts or direction. The process was painful, forcing her to revisit years of silence and resentment, but it was also liberating. She discovered that sharing her reality, however raw, was more powerful than any fictional role she had ever played. These battles left scars, but they also carved out a deeper resilience. Karen Grassle was no longer the unflinching mother figure America remembered. She was a woman who had stumbled, broken, and rebuilt herself. That transformation would shape the next stage of her journey, one defined not by hiding behind a character, but by standing fully as herself. Out of the ashes of her struggles came a revelation that shocked even her most loyal fans, and it would finally give her the chance to reclaim the dignity she had lost. By the early 2000s, Karen Grassle understood that silence had cost her as much as Hollywood's rejection. For decades, she had carried her disappointments privately, rarely correcting the public image of harmony that Little House on the Prairie projected. But as she grew older, she realized the value of telling the truth. Her decision to break that silence would transform her later years and reshape how audiences remembered her. The turning point came when she began work on her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust. Writing forced her to revisit moments she had buried: the pay disputes, the creative struggles, the years of invisibility after leaving the series. She chose not to gloss over the hard parts. Instead, she exposed them with clarity, even when it risked criticism. For fans who had long believed Little House was a set of perfect memories, her candor was startling. She revealed the tension with Michael Landon, the dismissiveness she endured as a woman in a male-dominated industry, and the personal toll of maintaining a spotless public image while crumbling inside. The backlash came quickly. Some fans, fiercely protective of Landon's legacy, accused her of bitterness. Others questioned why she had waited so long to speak. But for every critic, there were countless others who finally saw her in full. Letters arrived from women who recognized their own struggles in her words. The fight to be taken seriously, the loneliness of being underestimated, the courage it takes to confront addiction and rebuild. For the first time, Karen felt not like a symbol but like a human being whose truth mattered. Beyond the book, she returned to the stage with renewed energy. Regional theaters welcomed her, not as the nostalgic face of Little House, but as a seasoned actress with a lifetime of experience. Critics praised her performances in plays ranging from Shakespeare to contemporary dramas, noting a depth that only comes from years of lived struggle. Acting no longer carried the weight of saving her career. It was simply the craft she loved, stripped of the pressure of stardom. Her honesty also opened doors for reconnection. Castmates from Little House spoke warmly of her courage, and younger generations discovered her through interviews where she no longer hid behind polite deflections. She had once feared that speaking out would erase the affection fans held for her. Instead, it deepened it. Viewers who had grown up with her now saw not only Mal Ingalls, but the woman who had endured, stumbled, and persevered. Karen also devoted more time to advocacy. She became vocal about recovery, the need for equity in the entertainment industry, and the importance of aging with dignity. For a woman who had once felt invisible, becoming a voice for others gave her purpose. Her life no longer revolved around reclaiming past fame but in shaping a present that carried meaning. The late chapters of her life became marked not by fading into obscurity, but by quiet triumph. She had confronted her demons, told her truth, and rediscovered peace in authenticity. The weight of being forever tied to Caroline Ingalls softened, replaced by gratitude for what the role had given her and acceptance of the hardships that followed. And now at 82, Karen Grassle's story has reached a place few could have imagined, a mix of struggle and grace, leaving fans emotional when they learn what her life looks like today. Today, at 82 years old, Karen Grassle lives a life far removed from the bright lights of Hollywood. She no longer chases casting calls or seeks validation from an industry that once overlooked her. Instead, she has chosen a quieter existence, one built around reflection, recovery, and the connections that truly matter. The woman who once carried the weight of a nation's expectations has finally found space to breathe on her own terms. She continues to write and share her story, speaking candidly about the struggles that once threatened to define her. Fans who meet her at events or book signings describe her as approachable, gracious, and profoundly honest. There is no illusion of stardom left, only authenticity. And that honesty has brought her the admiration she longed for in her younger years. Rather than being remembered solely as My Ingalls, she is now recognized as a survivor who dared to tell the truth. Her health has naturally slowed her, but it has not silenced her. She treasures time with loved ones and remains deeply touched by the letters and messages she continues to receive from those who grew up watching Little House on the Prairie. Many tell her that Caroline Ingalls helped shape their childhood values. Others thank her for her courage in revealing that even admired figures battle demons. At 82, Karen has become a symbol of resilience, not for the perfection of a character, but for the humanity of the actress behind her. Looking back, she has admitted that her journey was far from easy, yet she no longer frames it as failure. The disappointments, the silence, the battles with addiction, and the long years of invisibility have all led her here, to a place of peace. She has come to terms with her legacy, one that is richer than any single role could define. For those who adored her in their living rooms decades ago, discovering the truth of her story now is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Karen Grassle's life at 82 reminds us that even the strongest symbols are human, that the people who shaped our memories carried their own scars, and in seeing her as she truly is today, not only as Caroline Ingalls but as Karen, a woman who endured and endured again, fans are left with a sense of both sorrow and gratitude. Sorrow for the pain she endured and gratitude that she shared her truth before time could erase it. For more emotional stories, check out this video.